What is going on, you guys? I want to talk to you today about some tips for playing huge Armada games. Now, why would you play a huge Armada game? Well, first off, maybe you just want to have some fun, right? So I have played some larger games before in excess of 400 points. I've done some 800 point games, and I think they pretty much went off without a hitch, but they do kind of take a little bit longer. So I wanted to bring up some options. I was inspired actually by Masters of the Fleet, so if you haven't checked them out, check Masters of the Fleet out. But they did this Battle of Adelon, huge battle, custom scenario. A lot of work went into that. It's very cool. It made me want to do some similar things. I don't know if I want to do like the scenario with the custom rules, because a lot of that would require like a third party to kind of have secret stuff for you. But I did think about, doing larger point games, over 1,000, even 1,200 points. I mean, and I could probably even see maybe a 2,000 point game at some point. But for right now, I'm thinking about maybe a 1,200 point game. And there's some things that I think would be really helpful in trying to do this. For one, it could take a long time. So there's some ways that we can talk about speeding up your games. So one of the ways, and I have a list here I'm going to go through for speeding up your games. One of the things that I think it would be important is for when you have duplicate ships, try to make sure that they all have the same upgrades. So here I have some ISD2s. All of my ISD2s have gunnery team and spinal armament, right? And I think you should agree with your opponent beforehand to the same set of like sporting rules, right? Like, look, let's agree that we're both gonna, for purposes of saving time. One of the problems you're gonna run into is if you've got 14 ships on the board, they're all going to get confusing, and the more ships you have, the more things if they all have different upgrades, it's going to get confusing what you're running. You're going to forget certain things. You're going to, and then you're like, oh, and then forgetting those things is going to make you take even longer when trying to pick which one to activate, and taking a long time of analyzing everything. But if everything is running the same upgrades, it'll be a lot faster. Not every ship to have the same upgrades, but every ship of the same type to have the same upgrades. I would also suggest, for all of your ISDs, to pretty much be the same type of ISD. Same thing goes for victories. It might not be that desirable to run a Simoon, a Kuat, an ISD1, and an ISD2, because again, it's going to cause more analysis paralysis and might really slow down your game. Now, if you are looking to play a 12-hour game, then maybe there's not a problem for you. But I think most of us, one of the complaints with Armada is that it can tend to take a long time. And so I think if we can find ways to speed up the game and simplify it a little bit, we can find ways to get more beautiful, larger games going in less amount of time. So first tip definitely would be to, try to make sure that your ships that are the same all have the same upgrades, so that much will be easier. Here I also have some victories. They're each going to have disposable capacitors and heavy ions. I have some Architons, 4 Architons here in this list. This is a 1,200 point list. They're all running turbo laser reroute circuits. I have some interdictors, and they're all running, targeting scramblers, just the one interdictor actually. And then I have some raiders with an expanded launchers. The next thing is going to be squadrons. Let's talk about squadrons. So you have an enormous amount of squadrons that you could run in a 1,200 point list. But I think if you want to maximize that and really just run 100. Not 100, but like 50 TIE fighters, you're going to fill up the board. You're going to clutter up the board, and I think you're going to slow down the game and kind of ruin a little bit of the game, I think. It's my own opinion here. So I think you should agree to a smaller limit on squadrons. I'd say for a 1,200 point game, or anything that you're just using a standard play area, right? I think if you exceed 200 points on squadrons, you're maybe doing a little bit too much. So I think you should agree with your opponent beforehand to set maybe a different cap other than 1/3 for squadrons. So I think for 1,200 points, I think if you went with a 200 point cap for squadrons, you'd still be able to have a meaningful squadron presence on the board without oversaturating the game with squadrons. Again, this is my opinion. You can come up with that whatever number you like, but I think if you go with strictly 1/3, you're going to be over 300 points, like almost 400 points of squadron. Well, it'd be exactly 400 points of squadrons at 1,200. That would be too much, and I especially considering how many TIE fighters, it could just become a complete mess, and I think it would ruin everybody's day. So let's talk about actual gameplay. One of the things I think you're going to run into is, well, a lot of us only have one damage deck. So what I would suggest is using the damage deck only for critical hits. Again, this is a casual format, so you don't have to worry too much about tournament regulations in the game, like a 1,200 point game. But if you've got any damage tokens from other games, like Legion damage tokens or Imperial Assault damage tokens, mark those on the ships themselves. Mark face down damage with tokens on the ships themselves, and leave everything else to the side. Now, as much as I would love to just mark everything on the ships themselves, you're still going to have to number your ships. You're still going to have cards. You may not have to pull all of the upgrades out, especially if they're all the same, but you'll definitely want a reference sheet handy nearby. But I would consider, especially for brace tokens and your defense tokens and things like that, but definitely mark them, number them, and have that reference there. And mark them with damage so you can see. You can mark them right on the ships themselves. You can put your dials, your command dials on the ships themselves. This way, at a glance, you'll be able to tell which ships have activated and which ones haven't. It may require you having a little bit more tokens and things on the board, but I think what you'll get out of that is you'll get a better representation of what has gone, what hasn't gone on the battlefield. And I think that's a pretty good idea. Even your speed tokens can go, like you can have right behind each ship, you can have its command tokens, command dials rather, the speed dial and damage card or damage tokens. And then you can leave crits potentially on the ship card themselves. You can do that if you need to. It would probably be a good idea if you went with less exhaustible cards. So like these victories I have in here might not be the best option for a big game like that, because I've got heavy ions which have to exhaust, and disposable capacitors which gets flipped. And so there's more stuff that I have to track for each ship. So it might be a better idea to go with more passive upgrades that always work, like Spinal Armament and Gunnery Team, for example. Might conceivably make things a little bit more simple. Again, this is up to you, but those are some tips from me. There are a couple other things, like if your play surface can support it, if you want to go a little bit beyond the 6x3 play mat, but maybe you don't have 3 play mats, a really cool option would be to take, if you've ever played any card games and you have a little card game play mat. This one is from a game called Doomtown, right? Well, you can take a couple of these and lay them out like sideways and kind of come up with and enhance your play surface a little bit. I've seen a lot of them that are 3 feet by like basically half of a play surface. So if you've got a mat like that laying around that half of a play surface, you just put it the neoprene side up, the black side up, flip your other play mats over, you'll have a full black play surface. You put this one in the middle, and now you've got, instead of 3x6, you've got like 3x7, so you have a little bit extra room for deployment. So that is certainly another option if you have something like that laying around. If not, you can always just use you could use something else to mark it off. I've seen people use like masking tape to mark off a play surface. So if you want to enhance your play surface a little bit beyond 3x6 for 1,200 points, that might be an option. You can still fit 1,200 points on a 3x6, but what you don't want is you run the risk, depending on how you wanted to do it, of the board becoming a little overcrowded, and then everybody just has to go straight because there's no room for anybody to turn. You definitely don't want that to happen. That would be a little unfortunate because it would take a little bit away. You want to be able to maneuver and fly. So another thing is setup. Now, obviously, at 1,200 points, your typical objectives aren't necessarily going to work. So you may want to decide on a specific objective ahead of time. You may want to go with something like Blockade Run would be a fun one to do if you were going to have a specific specific game planned around that, or you could just have it be a straight head-on collision. You don't have to play with objectives. This is something a lot of people didn't realize. Like in the core set, like the first game you play, you actually pass initiative back and forth, and that's playing without objectives. So one person gets to be first player one turn, the next person gets to be first player the next turn, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And you could, and that certainly makes things interesting, but especially if somebody's using somebody like Price or Bail Organa, this way you could plan it for a turn that's going to benefit you the most. So with that in mind, you can certainly enhance your play area. You can alternate with objectives or not using any objectives. Well, one of the things I think would be kind of cool is if you kind of did your setup beforehand, or if you were able to partition the middle or just not look at the other person's setup and basically just independently set up your ships so that it's a blind setup. If you're able to come up with a way to do that, either by laying some folders out or something to kind of block off your area right in the middle of the mat. Now you could do it long ways too, but if you're doing it, or you could do it like the short, where you each set up on the short ends. But if you're setting up on the long ends, going at each other like most standard games do, a couple of folders or something, or a couple of books kind of opened up to kind of block off the view from each other would be a really cool way to to have a blind setup, and then you'll kind of see where everybody is. And that, I think, would be a very fun way, because the other problem too is you're trying to maximize speed for these games so you can get to playing right away. And if you take so long setting up, because like a 1,200 point game could probably take a half an hour just to set up. Any time that we can knock off of setup would be huge. And you could, in the scenario could be we both came out of hyperspace blind, and not knowing what to expect. We both arrived at the exact same time, so nobody had time to position their fleets ahead of, so however we were flying in formation, that's how we came out of hyperspace. Again, I think that would be a kind of a cool way. So these are just some ideas, and this is a 1,197 point fleet that I had put together pretty quickly. I would definitely suggest, if you are going to do it, try to have some, like if you're the Empire, don't go with all Star Destroyers. Like throw a couple of small ships in there too, whether they be light cruisers or Gazantes or something like that, just so you can have some, some big and small, have a little bit of scale. But you should definitely have as many Star Destroyers as you can. Like at least, not everybody has that many. But again, if you're playing with a friend, maybe you pool collections too. You'll use like 2 of your buddies' Star Destroyers. If you can have like 3 or 4, that would look great. If you're the Rebels, you probably don't want 3 or 4 MC-80s. That might be a less realistic looking fleet. Maybe you'll want to go with like just a single MC-80, or like I would think maybe a Home One and a Liberty, and then trying to replicate maybe the Battle of Endor a little bit. So to have way more Nebulons and CR-90s, and hopefully one day we'll get the Brahatak Dornian gunships. And so we can kind of replicate certain battles a little bit more too, so you can kind of base your fleet design off of those. If you're only going to have one of a specific ship, then it really doesn't matter also what type of upgrades. And if you're doing the whole, all right, all of my ISDs are the same, I think you can make an exception for your flagship. Maybe just have that one that is kitted out separately, and I think that's probably okay as well. And these are just some of my ideas on how to facilitate larger games and make them better. And I guess lastly, you could play with you could team up, which is certainly an option too. I happen to have enough stuff where I don't want to team up. I want all the ships. I could probably field a couple of 2,000 point lists and still have ships to spare. So, but that's because I have a problem and I buy like way too much stuff. But if you're looking for an excuse to buy more ships too, and you're trying to get more veteran players an incentive to buy more ships, which a lot of us would like some incentive, maybe these larger format games will catch on for a long Sunday afternoon one of these days. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. There is still time to enter to win one of the other X-Wing 2.0 conversion kits. The first one was announced yesterday, so there's 2 more winners that are going to be announced this week, so stay tuned for that as well. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you are a patron, I want to give you a big thanks for that as well. We already had a Patreon giveaway this month. There'll be another one coming up next month. So thank you guys again so much for watching, and have a great day.